The researchers cite a figure that there were at least 493 attacks on humans, leading to 354 fatalities between 2010 and 2014.
For the past decade, every news headline about Florida's invasive species crisis has focused on one animal, the Burmese python. Giant constrictors swallowing deer whole, pythons wiping out 90% of the mammal population. Python hunts broadcast on national television. Python bounties, python hysteria, consuming every conservation budget in the state. The message was clear. The snakes are the enemy. Kill the snakes, save the Everglades. But while the entire world was distracted by the python war, something far more dangerous slipped into the water unnoticed. And this predator doesn't squeeze its victims to death. It doesn't wait passively for you to stumble upon it in the grass. This animal actively hunts humans. It stalks. It ambushes. It views you not as a threat to avoid, but as food to consume. In its native habitat, this creature kills more people every year than lions, sharks, and hippos combined. And now it's breeding in Florida's backyard waterways. This is the story of how the deadliest reptile on planet Earth established a breeding population in the Florida Everglades, right under the noses of wildlife officials, and why scientists believe we may have already lost the war before we even knew it had started.
Beautiful environment. It's so special. We're so lucky to have that in Florida and in this country. Alligators are wonderful. They're just, they're basically dinosaurs, and we're just lucky to be able to see them and see some of the things that they do. And be careful, respect them and enjoy it.
March 2012, Homestead, Florida. A patrol team is scanning the edges of the Cheatham Drain with halogen spotlights. In the Everglades, you can identify animals at night by the color of their eye reflection. Alligators glow red. Native crocodiles reflect a softer yellow. But the eyes staring back at the rangers that night didn't match anything in the local census. The spacing between them suggested a skull width that was wrong. Too wide, too confident. They assumed it was a large nuisance alligator and moved in to tag it. But when the boat drifted within 30 feet, the animal did something that Florida reptiles simply do not do. It charged. It hit the mud bank and sprinted on land, belly completely off the ground, reaching speeds of nearly 9 miles per hour before vanishing into the sawgrass. The rangers filed the report as an anomaly, a case of mistaken identity. 4 years later, a DNA sequencer at the University of Florida would prove that the thing in the water that night was no mistake. The tissue samples didn't match the American alligator. They didn't match the American crocodile. They didn't match anything that was supposed to exist in the Western Hemisphere. The genetic signature belonged to an animal from 7,000 miles away, the Okavango Delta of Botswana, a predator from the rivers of Africa. And the timestamp on the data revealed something terrifying. By the time we discovered them, the invasion had already been underway for over a decade. We weren't catching the first wave. We were catching the second generation. To understand why this discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community, you need to understand the existing power structure of the Florida Everglades. This ecosystem has been ruled by two apex predators for millions of years. First, the American alligator, dark, armored, and built to crush turtle shells. They dominate the freshwater sawgrass. Second, the American crocodile, a shy, reclusive fish eater that sticks to the brackish coastal waters. Here's the critical detail. In the entire recorded history of the United States, there has never been a single confirmed human death caused by an American crocodile. They are timid. They are endangered. They avoid confrontation. The system worked because the boundaries were clear. Gators stayed in the fresh water. Crocs stayed in the salt water. Humans could navigate both with relative safety. But in the mid-2000s, something changed. Fishermen in the Silver Bluff Creek area started reporting that large, dominant American crocodiles, animals that had held their territory for 20 years, were suddenly abandoning prime basking spots. They weren't dying, they were fleeing. In biology, an apex predator only abandons its territory for two reasons. The food disappeared, or something bigger moved in. At the time, everyone blamed the pythons. It was convenient. The python explosion was dominating headlines. When local residents reported seeing dark, aggressive lizards deep in the canals, biologists dismissed the claims. They assumed people were misidentifying melanistic alligators or seeing pythons swimming, but the locals were insistent. These new reptiles didn't act like anything they'd seen before. They didn't bask passively in the sun. They tracked boats. They sat high in the water, watching, waiting. While the media waged war against the snakes, a second invasion was happening right under our noses. The first real evidence didn't come from a sighting. It came from dead bodies. Rangers started finding carcasses of smaller reptiles that didn't fit the forensic profile of a python attack. A python kills by constriction. It causes cardiac arrest through compression and leaves the skeleton intact. These bodies were sheared apart, torn with rotational force, the signature of a death roll. But the bite radius was too wide for an alligator, and the aggression level was far too high for a native crocodile. Biologists suspected a rogue gator. They were about to discover that the creature patrolling these canals wasn't just a different species. It was a biological weapon operating on a completely different metabolic level. In 2009, a field team captured a juvenile crocodile in the canal system near Miami. It was small, barely a hatchling, but immediately the herpetology team noticed something was wrong. The architecture of the animal was incorrect. Dr. Kenneth Crisco at the Florida Museum of Natural History examined the specimen. On the surface, it had the V-shaped snout of a crocodile, but the dorsal armor, the bony plates called osteoderms that cover a crocodile's back, was unlike anything native to Florida. The American crocodile has irregular, scattered scutes with wide spacing. It's an organic, chaotic pattern. This specimen's armor was perfectly aligned, rigid, geometric, no gaps. It wasn't just a different skin pattern, it was a completely different blueprint. Then there was the behavior. Native American crocodiles go catatonic when captured, a survival mechanism to conserve energy. This animal didn't stop fighting. It displayed sustained high-octane aggression that bordered on suicidal. It didn't hiss. It produced a low-frequency growl that is rarely heard in Florida waters. The team wondered if it was a hybrid, maybe an American crocodile crossed with a Central American species. But theories required data, and the data they collected would destroy every comfortable assumption. Between 2012 and 2014, the team captured 3 more specimens. These weren't hatchlings anymore. They were subadults. And they were growing at a rate that defied the biological laws of the Everglades. Reptiles are cold-blooded. Their growth is limited by heat and food availability. In Florida's competitive environment, an American crocodile grows slowly, carefully conserving energy. These animals were growing 28% faster than their native counterparts. In the wild, a 28% advantage isn't a statistic. It's a death sentence for everything else. It means reaching sexual maturity faster. It means hitting apex size faster. It means eating the competition before they can eat you. The team extracted tissue samples and sent them to the sequencing lab, looking for a specific marker in the mitochondrial DNA, the cytochrome B gene. This gene acts as a biological passport. It tells you exactly where an animal's ancestors originated. The team expected the results to point to Central America, maybe Cuba or Jamaica. When the sequencer finished its run in May 2016, the coordinates didn't point to the Caribbean. They pointed to a river system responsible for more human deaths than any other wildlife habitat as Earth. The machine had found a perfect match. Crocodilus niloticus, the Nile crocodile. The results were published in the Journal of Herpetological Conservation and Biology, and they confirmed a worst-case scenario. The American crocodile is a specialist fish eater that avoids humans. The Nile crocodile is a generalist man-eater. It is responsible for an estimated 200 human fatalities every single year in its native range. It doesn't see humans as threats. It sees us as biomass, as calories. But the geneticists found something even more disturbing buried in the data. Nile crocodiles are spread across 26 African countries. The Florida specimens didn't match populations in Egypt or Uganda. Their genetic markers were identical to a specific subpopulation in the KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa. This was the smoking gun. Crocodiles don't swim 7,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. The KwaZulu connection confirmed human trafficking. Someone imported Specimens from this exact South African lineage brought them into Florida and released them when they became unmanageable. But the species identification was only half the horror. The other half was the timeline. The team caught a hatchling in 2009. They caught subadults in 2012 and 2014. Genetic analysis confirmed these animals were siblings, meaning a breeding pair existed in the wild. To produce a hatchling in 2009, the parents had to be sexually mature. Nile crocodiles take 10 to 12 years to reach maturity. This means the original breeding pair has likely been in the Everglades since roughly 1998 or 2000. For nearly 15 years, two massive African apex predators lived, hunted, and bred in the Florida suburbs, completely undetected. They survived the hurricanes. They survived the cold snaps. They survived the python explosion. We caught their children. We removed them from the wild. But here's the question that keeps biologists awake at night. We found the offspring. We never found the parents. The immediate threat is the Nile crocodile itself, an animal hardwired over millions of years of evolution to view humans as prey, an animal that has perfected the art of the ambush, an animal that waits at water's edge for mammals to drink, then explodes from the surface in a fraction of a second. But the long-term nightmare is something even more sinister. It's a biological concept called heterosis, commonly known as hybrid vigor. The American crocodile and the Nile crocodile are genetically similar enough to interbreed. They diverged recently enough on the evolutionary tree that their chromosomes can still combine. In captivity, related crocodile species have produced hybrid offspring that are larger, stronger, and more aggressive than either parent species. The worst traits of both lineages combined into one animal. Currently, the Native American crocodile is trapped by temperature. It's tropical. If it swims too far north, winter cold, snaps kill it. It's biologically fenced into the southern tip of the state. But the Nile crocodile thrives in varied climates, from equatorial heat to the cooler waters of southern Africa. It is robust. It is adaptable. If the invasive Niles manage to mate with the native population, the resulting hybrid could inherit the Nile's aggression and the Americans' local adaptations. We wouldn't just be facing a man-eater. We would be facing a super croc, capable of expanding north into the residential canals of Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, potentially as far as Orlando. The barriers that kept the monsters in the swamp are dissolving. Since the 2016 confirmation, Florida Fish and Wildlife has operated under a shoot-on-sight policy for Nile crocodiles. No catch and release, no relocation, immediate termination. The goal is total eradication before the population can establish itself permanently. But is eradication even possible at this point? The Everglades is 1.5 million acres of flooded sawgrass, mangrove tunnels, and black water so dark you can't see 6 inches below the surface. This is terrain that has swallowed entire civilizations. In 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a 100-ton Boeing 27 carrying 176 passengers, crashed into this swamp. Rescue teams searched for days. Pieces of the wreckage were never recovered. The grass swallowed them completely, as if the plane had never existed. If a jetliner can vanish in this terrain, hiding a breeding population of crocodiles is effortless. We caught the 2009 hatchling. We caught the 2012 subadult. We caught the 2014 sibling. We removed every specimen we found. But science relies on probability, and probability tells us that for every animal we catch, others remain. The parents, the breeding pair from the year 2000, were never located. They likely died of old age, or perhaps they're still out there, ancient, massive, watching the airboats pass. For years, we obsessed over the pythons. We built an entire media industry around hunting snakes. We televised python roundups. We celebrated python kills. We convinced ourselves that if we could just eliminate the constrictors, the Everglades would be saved. And while we were looking down at the pythons slithering through the grass, something else was looking up at us from the water. Something patient, something ancient, something hungry. The king of the Nile has claimed a new kingdom. This is not a python problem anymore. This is not a nuisance animal that needs to be relocated. This is a predator that has killed more humans than any other reptile in recorded history. And it is breeding, right now, in American waters. The pythons squeeze, they constrict, They wait for you to come to them. The Nile crocodile hunts. It stalks. It comes to you. In this kingdom, we are no longer the tourists enjoying the wildlife from a safe distance. We are the prey.